Meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. Take roll. Do we take roll normally? That's like the old city business coming back. We'll start with a pledge of allegiance and a prayer by Pastor Tim Adrian of Westside Baptist Church. I
pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pastor Tim.
Dear God in heaven, Lord, we thank you for our time together today. Lord, we thank you for our community and for Reno County. Today, Lord, I ask that you would watch over our peace officers, our fire department, other first responders. I pray that for their safety. Lord, today we ask that you would give wisdom to our commissioners and to our agency leaders. Lord, I pray that you would guide them, help them. Lord, help us to be a people that are good. Help us to be a people that do things that are right and fair and just. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you. I feel bad.
Oh, in the corner, people can't see the flag.
I try to wait until Mr. Sellers. Well, again, welcome everyone. asked the county clerk's office to be here, Donna Patton and Jenna Fager, to give us an update. There were some particular or unusual circumstances and challenges that they're working through on of the election count, and I think we sent out a press release, but wanted an opportunity for the clerk and deputy clerk to brief us on the matter and the commission to ask any questions. So, Jenna?
Good morning. Jenna Fager, Deputy County Clerk. So we did our regularly scheduled audit on Friday, and it was discovered that in the in-person advance voting, we were off on some numbers on the state treasurer's race. We had audited 11 precincts, and some were correct and some were not. So in lieu of that, we've decided to go ahead and do a full hand count audit of the ballots that were cast in the in-person advance voting. So we are still currently working on that. We brought in 9 boards to do that. And what was discovered is a small portion of the ballots were printed with the state treasurer candidates in the wrong order. We realized there was an error and made the decision to do a hand count audit on all the races that were cast in the walk-in advance voting. The county commission races were not affected. And we've still got 2 boards that are finishing up, but as of right now, there have been no changes in any other races.
Thank you, Jenna. Any questions for Jenna?
When will you be completed?
They are working on balancing today, so we're hoping by this afternoon we'll have some totals.
So at this point, you still feel we'll be able to do the canvass on Thursday?
We still have 438 provisionals that we need to research, so we would really like to ask if you could extend that to next Monday at 9 a.m. Would that be a problem? We just want to have enough time to be prepared.
Okay. Tell us your how you research the provisionals. I've had questions. Usually as a county commissioner, I don't get any questions, but I've had questions this last night from a citizen just not understanding the process. So tell
Absolutely.
us the process of how it becomes provisional and then what your research is before the board.
Sure. If you have any kind of name change, or if you have moved and you didn't get re-registered, if there's any kind of issues with your registration based on what the poll book says, then we have you do a provisional ballot. We don't turn any voters away. They are allowed to do a provisional ballot, and then those come back to our office and we research those. On the back of the provisional envelope, there's a voter registration card, and that gets them re-registered correctly. Anything that was wrong, it gets that changed. So we take those and we research each one of those individually, see if by this statute or that statute, if it should count or not. And then when we take it to canvass, we have those in groups, and this group was a name change, this group was not registered, this group moved within county. And then we present them to you guys. I think a misconception is that if it's provisional, then it's not going to count, and that's not the case at all. Even if it's a ballot that you can vote on certain races, we do a hand count of those races that you would be eligible to vote in.
Commissioner Hurst?
I just want to thank the clerk's office for catching that situation and immediately letting people know what the situation was and handling it to make sure that our voting is correct.
Thank you. We wish it hadn't happened, but it did, and the system is working, so.
Jenna, on the boards that you bring in, can you describe like who makes up those boards?
For the audit boards, it's supposed to be people who have never touched a ballot in that election. And so we draw from a Republican, a Democrat, and then unaffiliated or another Republican or another Democrat. But we do have a bipartisan board that comes in and does that audit.
So each board has kind of a balance of representation.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And that's kind of, is that the same board that I mean, in this case, you say they're not the same ones that took the ballot, but it's a similar type of board that you would see when you walk up and cast
Correct.
your ballot. There's usually 3 people there.
Yes, it makes, it's 3 people that make up the board, and so you've got 2 people who have the books that they're doing the hand tallies with, and then 1 person who's going through the ballots and reading the races off to them. And so it's kind of a double check to make sure that you stay in line and
Yeah.
get the same count.
Well, I've always appreciated those people that volunteer, and they seem to always take their job very seriously. And same with your department. You guys always seem very professional and nonpartisan in your work, and so, like Commissioner Hurst, Commissioner Sellers said, appreciate you guys finding the issue and addressing it. On the matter of rescheduling the canvas, do we? I know in the past we've had a little trouble rescheduling once it's published. Do we just put another notice out about?
I can do the publication, yeah.
Is that what we need to do
I
then?
think you should go ahead and take a vote and just make it formal, just to make sure it's published and
Okay.
everything. Then you want Monday?
Monday at 9 a.m., please.
Does that work
That
for
works for me.
the commission?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation by the deputy election clerk to change the canvas to next Monday. What is the date on that? The 15th? 15th at 9 a.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Hurst. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Hurst.
Yes.
Commissioner Sellers.
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Is there anyone here for a public comment for an item not on the agenda or otherwise? Hearing none, does the commission have any additions or revisions to the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, a request is being made for an economic incentive for a fiber project. I'd like to suggest that we put that request prior to 6A, no, I'm sorry, prior to 7A, under business items.
Okay. Is there, do you have any problem with that, Commissioner Hurst?
I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Well, by consensus, we'll add that to 7A. I'd like the clerk to note that likely will involve a conflict of interest for me, and I'll abstain from that decision. Any other additions?
I have none.
No.
Oh, thank you. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda.
I would move that we approve the consent agenda items 6A through 6D.
Second the motion.
Motion by Sellers, second by Hurst to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Hurst.
Yes.
Commissioner Sellers.
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen.
Yes. At this time, we have the 7A1, an economic development request. Again, I have a conflict of interest in this matter, so I'm going to go ahead and step out and allow the vice chair to proceed with the meeting until that's over.
Thank you. This is an item that came up just in the last couple of days that concerns a grant that the state is making for fiber, possibly in Reno County, and a request from a vendor who might be the one getting the grant, he might not be. And so, and also I believe Deborah Tufel from the Chamber is here to address this issue. So
Mr. Kaplan, would you introduce yourself and
Yes, thank you.
request, advise us on what your request is?
Yes, if I may approach first and hand you some documents. Thank you. My name's Ethan Kaplan. I'm General Counsel and Director of Broadband Advocacy for IdeaTech. As you're well aware, IdeaTech is a Reno County-based internet service provider. We have laid about 4,000 miles of fiber optic cable around Kansas. We've hit a lot of premises around rural Reno County. And today what I'm here asking for is community support for a project or an application we're trying to put forward to the state of Kansas. Kansas has received $83.5 million from the federal government in order to deploy rural broadband expansion. It is up to the state of Kansas to allocate these funds to the areas in Kansas that are most in need. So therefore, as vendors, as you stated, this came up in the last couple days. Well, that's very true. We were given July 25th, the applications opened, the criteria was set, and we have until August 18th to get these applications in. So from what it sounds like, based on letters of intent to apply, it's going to be about 300% oversubscribed, meaning that there's going to be way more money requested than they have, which means that the only applications that are going to get approved are the strong ones. And so what I'm here asking for are basically us to look at the factors. The first factor is technology, which we meet heavily. The limitations set forth by the criteria is 100 megabytes per second up, 100 megabytes per second down. IdeaTech's fiber optic network far exceeds that. Right now, we'll be giving 20 times that to rural Kansans so that they can have the same sort of speeds that we enjoy here in the city and the others that are connected. So with technology, I think we'll be fine. We have a strong application. The community support, we've received support already from the community. As Ms. Till's here from the Chamber, she'll be talking more about the economic development. She's also going to be providing a letter of support. Aubrey Patterson from the Community Foundation is doing a letter of support. We're also seeking support from representatives. Senator Moran, we're trying to get him to support as well. So that it brings us to why I'm here, and probably the hardest ask of us is to try to strengthen the application through community support financially. In speaking with the Department of Broadband, it has come to our attention that the applications that have some sort of support economically and financially from the community leadership are going to be received priority. Does that guarantee anything? No. But it seems like we should certainly try to get this application approved. And so we've been trying to determine what the best way to get Reno County this money. We have determined that there's an application that Reno County is going to have 600 premises that we will meet. And I've added those. You'll see a map in there that'll show you where. What we're asking for is with those 600 premises, we'd like to have a contribution per premise. And I've done some calculations. I will say this, that the grant for Reno County specifically, and that's what I want to focus on, is $3.3 million that we'll be asking. IdeaTech, as part of the grant, has to contribute a match per a scale. That'll be $600,000 approximately that IdeaTech will be putting into the project itself. These premises will then be, as I mentioned, in western Reno County, but there's also right just south of Haven, which is right on that K-96 corridor. So it's basically going to be able to give access to these folks that do not have it at this point, and that in the future will need to have it so they can remain working from home, they can have school from home, they can have a lot of agricultural business utilizes technology that requires data, and it's only going to get more. And so, as I'm sure you're well aware, and that's been kind of the branding behind broadband, is it's going away from a luxury and becoming a utility. It almost is a utility right now, and I'd say at this point there's a reason that the state and the federal government are trying to get broadband to every home in the country, because no one should be without access just because they live in rural I think that's important, and I will explain why the costs are so much and why rural doesn't have it right now. And I'll do this by saying that it's kind of like a hockey stick. The costs to build these fiber as you're in denser areas is minimal, and as you go up towards more denser areas, it gets crazy astronomical. And when you hit these areas that we've focused on, the 600 premises, they're what's in the 10% range, which where the stick just goes crazy high, where it's thousands and thousands of dollars to go over those sorts of miles. So basically what I'm asking for is a contribution from you. Again, we think that the stronger the match, the better our chances. Obviously, in Reno County, we have Jade, who's the Hutchinson mayor, whose leadership, she's Department of Broadband, so this is going to be her call ultimately, but granted, she's got to have some justification to make that. She can't favor Reno County, and she won't. But what we can do is make our application so strong that this money will come here as opposed to other areas, because it is coming to Kansas regardless. And it's a matter of who wants it and who's going to take advantage of that opportunity. So I think we have a number of options. One of those ideas would be a per premise match, which means for every premise that gets approved, the county would contribute a portion of those funds. I've allocated that if, for instance, if the county did $40 per premise for 602 premises, that would equal contribution match or a pledge of just right around $24,000. At 35 a premise, it's right around $21,000. At $30, it's $18,000, and at $25, it's right around $15,000. And so what we'd ask is that, and I know Ms. Tupel will talk to the economic development portion of this as we put in some literature for you as well, but I think you'll find that the benefits of getting this money in and meeting and reaching these people are going to help Reno County tremendously. It's going to provide a huge boost to the growth of it, and it'll allow people to live rural if they want. Don't let the fact that rural doesn't have good service be a reason that they can't live there. Especially today with work from home, it's nice. It's important that we support our rural Reno County. So with that, I'll hand it over to...
Before
Yes,
Deborah comes
yes.
up, I have some questions, maybe.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Hurst would. What type of service would these people have at this point in time, these 600 so-called Reno County residents?
If they have service, I would say they have either a satellite, like through Dish Network, or I know Starlink came out. They might also have, I don't know if they have cable. They might have wireless, some sort of wireless, because I know all of this is have been temporary solutions to try to get access to these people. But I will say this about all these technologies that they have, is that there are limitations. And when you're looking at wireless, if the more people that are on a certain network, the more it's capped and the more limitation in capacity. And that's what's so nice about broadband, fiber optic broadband, is that the capacity, it's scalable, it's reliable. We can always push more data through there, especially as technology grows. We'll be able to do 10 times that, and where cable, and you have a copper maybe in the they're going to have to rebuild to try to meet that capacity.
Is it possible that some other vendor statewide will be making a grant request for Reno County?
That is possible. And if they came to you and they were going to say, we want to have some community support, I would fully support that as well. Because I think, and I hope IdeaTech has put out their mission is not so much to be the favored provider. It's really to support rural unserved areas. And I think what you'll find also is that when you go out in rural Kansas or rural anywhere in the country, you'll find that there's a lack of competition, and that's really because of the cost to build. And we support that because that means lower rates. But our rates are, because of this creative problem solution, which is trying to take advantage of opportunities that come, we're able to keep our rates affordable. So they'll be eligible for our standard rates, which have a tiered system and will fit them. Businesses, for instance, can get more data than someone that just needs a little bit, so they won't have to pay as much.
So, and maybe Deborah will tie into what you're visiting about, but is the request for some type of economic grant based on how many people are eventually hooked up by this grant or by the potential of hookups by the grant?
Thank you, Commissioner. It's a great question. We'd ask for by potential hookups. The reason being is we can't say right now who would hook up or what, but I think the strength of this application goes by support. And I think if the state of Kansas, and again, I'm speaking for the state of Kansas here, which I don't want to do, but the state of Kansas will look at that and say, well, here's a pledge no matter what. It'll be this much money, which means, and we're fine, again, if it's capped at a certain amount, if you wanted to do that. I think anything we can do to show the state of Kansas we're serious in Reno County about broadband expansion, it's really just giving them a harder and harder time to say no.
Okay, so what you're saying is that ours or some economic commitment that might be made to add to the strength of this grant application would be a number of dollars not dependent upon how many eventual hookups are made.
Correct. It'd be a matter of premises, so premises passed, which I should mention, we may submit this application, and because I said there's like 300% oversubscribed, the state of Kansas may look and say, well, wait a second, there's already an application out here for this, or this service is better than others, so they may give a portion of our project that gets approved. So it may not be the total amount that I'm telling you today per 600. It may be less depending on what it's approved for. But I think that's sort of an easier way to pledge as opposed to saying we'll just give you this fixed amount.
Okay. Mr. Hurst, do you have questions? Yeah. Since your conversation with me yesterday,
Yes.
I decided I would do a little checking.
Good.
Okay? So I made some phone calls to people out in the rural areas, and I even made a visitation to what I consider thought would have the potential to really utilize this because of size and scale. And there's several questions I would have, and I see your map here. The green portions are the ones that you are with this grant. That's what you're looking at.
Yes. So we have, for this application itself, this is the green portions you're seeing are the areas that will be covered.
Okay.
And we're not asking, you'll see in there's some, like in Sedgwick County, there's a little tiny area, I can't remember how many homes, but.
Sedgwick and Harvey.
Yes. And in those counties, we're not asking you to contribute to those. That's their portion, and we'll worry about that. What we want you to worry about or to be concerned with is just Reno County.
But your package includes all of these?
Yes, it's 1,000 homes.
Okay. And that's what I was looking at here this morning. And I was unknown about what areas that you were looking at. But this is roughly, all right? And a couple of those areas that you would probably be involved with, and I didn't go up into Hayes and North Hayes because there's no one person, one family in North Hayes, okay? But in Sylvia, there are 32 homes, according to the map that I have, in that Sylvia Township. And unknown to you, I did a little other just looking at through the map. Enterprise has about 52 homes. And I don't think Langdon, I don't believe, is on this, but they had 40. And when I looked at the fact that Reno County has, if you consider the east and west and north and south changes in the townships, we have 36 townships. And if there's roughly, and there'll be more than this, but averaging 50 households per township, we're looking at over 1,800, and I know there's more than 50 average. And so from that aspect, how many miles of fiber optics cable have you laid in Reno County so far?
I can't tell you that. I know there are people at IU Tech that can give you that answer. I don't even want to estimate. All I can say is because we're based out of rural Reno County, and that's kind of where our heart is, I believe we've laid a lot more than elsewhere. I don't want to commit to that because I don't know.
Well, in my conversations with one individual, as of now, their daughter and son-in-law have moved back here and run a home business. She runs a home business out of that household, and all done over the internet. And they're fortunate enough to be able to hook up to fiber optics, and that's made a big difference to them. Now, with regards to the other areas here in western Reno County, I guess I see you targeted an area, and it doesn't include some of the western Reno County areas. And I know you have fiber optics running right through on Trails West, and people could get hooked up to that, right?
Right.
Their fee might be too high. I know they have wireless now, and it's working pretty good in some of those areas. Some of the areas, it's not working very well at all.
Right.
And other entities, other businesses that they've been into hasn't worked very well either. But that was main questions I had, and there is a large population down in that south of Haven, southeast of Haven. And I don't know how much fiber you've laid in that line, but will that require quite a bit more main lines?
So, Commissioner, what they've done, again, with the goal of having the strongest application, we've had to look at places that are not served or that do not have access.
Okay.
So if those, and that's a very general spot. I know the analytics at Ideatech are much more specific. Those spots have been determined that if we put this application in, the state of Kansas will see that these people have no access, that in order for Ideatech or any other vendor to build out to them would be too costly. So what I would say is we may have fiber optics in the area that they might have access to. And again, that's more of a residential sales or business sales that they'd go out and ask them if they want to hook up. But for our purposes, you'll see that the areas that we'll be targeting are areas that we think the state will look at and say, it's just not feasible without this money going into rural Reno County. I think that's our argument to make. And so we're asking you to help us strengthen our argument, essentially.
All right. Yeah, and so, I was very cautious about this to start with, as you probably
Sure.
entertained from our conversation, okay? But after visiting with specifically the residents, some of the residents in my particular representation area, I have become a little more positive to the fact that when I see the potential for more small business potential out there, maybe this will attract a younger generation if it's available. I know myself, we switched just to have good, no, we're not on fiber optics, okay. And that's one thing I will say about Turon and that area. SC Telecom, that's another area I wanted to chastise our phone companies for, because they receive funds from, it's not UCC, what's the name of that?
The FCC?
Pardon?
I'm not sure.
They receive funds from larger areas to bring out to the rural areas.
USF.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
And they haven't done that. They haven't been proactive in that area. And I really think that's really a bad deal for them. But thankfully, someone else has that capability of coming out, and they've made that a priority. Unfortunately, I don't know where that money goes that they got, but now we got to rely on federal money to get this done.
And Commissioner, to your point on the wireless, I do, like as you mentioned, you talk to someone who has a home business, and they may be on wireless now, or there's a lot of home businesses that are on wireless now. And I know that during the pandemic and during CARES, a lot of it was targeted towards fixed wireless. And fixed wireless is limited, unfortunately, and you'll find that as we grow in technology and more data is required for these Zoom calls and for other technology, it's going to become more limited. And so the opportunity for someone to be able to grab onto that fiber optic cable and not have the data caps and the limited capacity is going to be extremely helpful for their businesses.
And regarding other areas that may be
Yes.
affected or could be affected or would be later on, what's the long-range plan to connect there? I know, last I knew, you could push fiber optics about a half a mile or a mile on copper.
Well, see, copper's got that capacity issue.
Not very far.
Yeah, and that's and I'm not going to speak for certain cable providers that have
Yeah.
service here, but they use what's called a hybrid fiber situation, which is where they have fiber optic cable that goes into a central location, and then copper or coax
Yeah.
will go out from there, and they call it hybrid fiber. The technology it's the same. You're still limiting. It's like trying to funnel through.
I understand.
And so, unfortunately, that's just doesn't. It's not going to keep up. And at some point, they're going to have to invest millions
Can't
of
do the
dollars.
speed.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
You have the capability, but just not the capacity and the speed. Is
Right.
that what you're telling
And
me?
at some point, you're going to have to invest, and that's why you haven't seen it done, because it's going to cost millions of dollars to get that infrastructure pulled out and new fiber optic infrastructure put in.
And that's why I'd like to really praise SC Telcom for what they've done in their rural areas. But no, just a sidebar,
Sure.
okay?
Sure.
From what I've learned, and I'll let Deborah talk about you, but I'll make my comments about what I think after you're.
Okay.
Well,
Let's hear from
you're ready.
Deborah now.
Thank you,
about
Commissioners.
The
Appreciate it.
Chamber of Commerce's economic development thoughts.
Well, thank you, Commissioners, for letting me weigh in for a minute on the economic impact of what rural broadband means for Reno County. This became very evident to us, especially during COVID, when people were trying to work and learn from home, and there were definite disparities across Reno County on who had access. That's no secret. And I want to take a look back in 2020 at an opportunity that we also walked alongside Idea Tech with a grant opportunity that they had in front of them to deploy to some of the areas that are no longer shown in green on the map that Ethan provided. And part of that reason is that in 2020, they embarked on a fiber connectivity project that we participated in. That project served Abbeville, Langdon, Arlington, Pretty Prairie, and Willowbrook, and delivered high-speed internet to the last mile that Idea Tech was looking at that point. They deployed millions of dollars of fiber, but what they came to us at that point and asked was, would Greater Hutch, as the Economic Development Partnership for Reno County, provide a matching grant? Because the matching grants make these applications to the state and federal programs more competitive. We embarked on that along with the Hutch Community Foundation, and we ourselves put $30,000 in at that point to help make that project a win. It was a win. We have a performance report from Idea Tech that shows that they completed that in 2021. So looking forward, we want to make sure we're doing that for the further reaches of Reno County. And I did some research yesterday because I know that, you know, you're a fan of agriculture, and agriculture is over 20% of our rural economy. And I thought, what would the Farm Bureau say about this? Reno County Farm Bureau is a strong organization, but they have a national organization, the American Farm Bureau Foundation, that has quite a bit of research about what rural broadband means. So I'm just going to borrow from their language because I think it's pretty impactful. One of their statements is, we look at broadband as a necessity to positioning communities for success in the future. But they go on to say, and this was a report from April of this year, about the state of broadband access in rural areas in our country. We've all experienced poor internet connections. They are part of a modern life, and the frustrations are palpable. But imagine if you lived in a rural area where broadband is a necessity for your business, your children's education, quality health care for remote access, and other activities, but access is the exception rather than the norm. Americans in rural areas around the country need broadband the same as you do. Rural broadband is a critical pathway for farmers, ranchers, and others to stay connected and be informed on markets and news of the day and share their story with you and others. Farmers and ranchers depend on this infrastructure of broadband just as they do highways, rail, and waterways. I think that kind of says it all, because where precision agriculture is going, it isn't just connecting the small business that we need. It isn't just connecting the home. Precision agriculture is relying on broadband connectivity simply to be able to use their equipment efficiently and track where they're placing their seed, where they're placing fertilizer, where they're seeing moisture. All of that relies on that high-speed internet. So I think just to support agriculture in the rural areas of our county, this is a necessity. Now, the question is just how do you pay for it? It's very fortunate that there are federal grants coming down, and they're coming down so fast that it's even hard to keep up with all of the applications. This one was announced in July. We learned about it through Idea Tech last week, and so we have a really quick turnaround on how do we decide as a county to respond to make Idea Tech's application as competitive as we can, competing with all these hundreds of applications that are going to come in from the state. So I would just suggest one model that you could look at on a per premise residence basis is some sort of a grant through Greater Hutch, much like we did last time, that passes through to Idea Tech but comes through the Greater Hutch funding. And I say that because the funding that we receive from you in budget allocation, you probably think it goes into just daily operation. What it really does is seed community development projects. In the last few years, we've put seed money into childcare. We've put seed money into housing initiatives. We provide $15,000 a year to healthy neighborhood initiatives in Reno County. We seed the Epic Skills program through Boys and Girls Club. All of those things are basic services, and I think rural broadband is just another basic service that we need to be looking at how we keep Reno County competitive. So as long as our budget request remains whole, there is a line item allocation in our budget called Community Development Initiatives, and I would say that's where this would come from. That's where we pulled the $30,000 3 years ago that went directly into deploying rural broadband. Honestly, that took almost the entirety of our budget allocation that year, but that's good because it's helping grow the economy in the rural parts of our county. So I would propose that's one way you could look at this. If you continue to make our Greater Hutch funding request whole, we would honor that commitment that these kinds of matching funds could be considered through Greater Hutch. I'd be open for questions.
I did, one of my stops was to Cameron Pierce, who's president of the Reno County Farm Bureau, and unfortunately he was gone out of the U.S., so didn't get to talk to him, so I didn't bother to ask Connor to have him call me.
Yeah, I was at their Farm Bureau meeting last week. They had a great annual meeting, and kudos to such a strong Farm Bureau organization for our county. I bet if they had a chance to weigh in on this, they'd lean on their national organization, and they would have quoted these same things I shared with you, Ron.
So let me see if I'm hearing you correctly on what your proposal is. To take that funds that you're requesting for the community development, and I think that was, is that economic, that 34,000?
Actually, yes, the requested increase this year was to $50,000 for the community development piece. We also have a request in there for the Market Hutch and Growth Inc. funds, but this one would specifically be from that Greater Hutch Community Development Fund, and we've requested $50,000 because we already have commitments towards housing and childcare out of that.
Yes. As we go on down the road, we look at other opportunities that maybe we should have saved a little back for that they're coming up. But yeah, I would.
Mr. Hurst, I feel strongly that I think this is an important thing for Reno County. I go to the education aspect. I just think that if we provide appropriate means for people to get educated well, that's a very good economic aspect. But I also think that this is part of the Chamber's economic development items. You know, they come to us for parks, they come to us for all kinds of things, and I think it needs to be their decision what monies are used where, not ours. And so basically, my suggestion today is to leave this in the hands of the chamber and have them, if they desire, make a commitment for this grant on behalf of Reno County.
Okay, now, you're going to have to, I would agree, education, because one of the people I talked to yesterday, they were on, before they got on fiber optics, they were on wireless. And their son could not complete his work until, once they got on fiber optics, the snap. So I see your point. I hear your point. But now you're going to have to fill me in on where the county's funds come into effect here and what that.
Well,
work me through this process.
Would you like me to save that for the budget discussion, or do you want to walk through that now?
I
think that
now I'd like to know more about it right now, because I agree with you. I think I like your point about where it comes through, but I also think we need a letter from the county.
Well, sure. I think that's a separate deal, that we can provide the applicant a letter of support from the county without giving any funds from the county. Isn't that correct, Randy, that you could provide?
We can do a letter of support, I guess, on the money from the chamber. If it goes through there, it's kind of seen as also part of Reno County.
Mm-hmm.
But as Deborah's mentioning, their Economic Development Council in the county budget gets $50,000 this year. Next year, the request is $84,000.
Mm-hmm.
I think that increase, that's where Deborah's saying that increase helps cover this. So in a way, it's coming through the chamber, but the increase in their funding is
from the county citizens,
or keep that going in the future. So that's important for her budget to get that increase to cover for the county this time.
So
kind of how
essentially you're looking at that 34,000 or to be utilized in the advancement of the fiber optics in the needed areas. Is that what?
Right.
I
So
don't think you're needing to do that much.
The reason for the increased request this year, in the past you have funded $50,000, and that was split between two operating entities, Greater Hutch, which is your economic development fund, and Market Hutch, which is the retail promotion, which helps drive sales tax growth, which is another indicator of where the county's going. This year, we have actually asked for an increase in two funds, Greater Hutch, but also asking for $20,000 for Growth Inc., which we've talked about. Growth Inc. is the arm that is working on an industrial park for Reno County. And in order to launch that park, there are many studies that need to be done to complete the readiness to get ready for infrastructure to that park. This year alone, Growth Inc. has invested through some of our reserves and mostly through funding that we received from City of Hutchinson, about $31,000 in preparation for that park. There are some additional infrastructure studies that need to be embarked on, and in all fairness, honestly, Growth Inc. in the past has always been funded by City of Hutchinson, but this new endeavor and this new park is going to be squarely out in Reno County in the unincorporated area south of South Hutchinson. And for that reason, I did ask for a budget increase to allocate money for Growth Inc. for $20,000 for that purpose. The additional increase in the budget is for Greater Hutch. And that's because you're going to continue to see more of these federal dollars coming down through the state that are going to mean grant opportunities, but they always require local match. We're going to need to demonstrate that. And so that was the reason for the budget ask this year, is in preparation for what's really going to be a monumental number of projects asking for matching dollars.
Yeah.
And this would be one. This is case in point.
Where does it start and stop?
Right, that's right. So we know that's a large budget increase ask. It just is. But it's strategic, and it's for a purpose that we put Reno County on a growth trajectory with the new industrial park, but also rural growth.
So, Commissioner Hurst, would you agree that we're going to put this in the hands of the Chamber's Economic Development Funds and not make a decision as far as any county monies being used for this project today?
There's no additional asking for this project from the county, in addition to what we normally do to the chamber for their economic
Right. The
programs.
requests that we have before you are on behalf of that Economic Development Advisory Council, and you have a seat on that council. It's made up of 15 people that are working in the best interests of economic development. Honestly, Ethan and I will have to take this request to them, but it is squarely in the area of things that we support as an Economic Development Council: broadband, childcare, housing, basic services.
I myself don't have any trouble in allocating somewhere around $15,000 to this project. And we'll worry about the budget later on. But, I mean, that's where I'm kind of at. After speaking with citizens in the district that have been affected or could be affected.
Deborah,
Thank you
Are
all.
you going to need any more money this year in your budget?
In '22 or in the '23 request?
22,
No.
based on using that? I just
No.
want to make sure. that-
No, I'm not making any request out of '22. We have requested the '23 increase.
Right.
And we do have dollars in our '22 budget continuing for special projects. So
Okay.
this, ultimately, we would need this to make up for the shortfall in
Yeah,
'23.
Just clarifying, 'cause
Yes.
as I see it as county money and.
And
as
honestly,
chamber money.
I imagine that because this is a competitive grant, the application will have to go in August 18th. It doesn't mean a decision is made right away. There's going to be a decision-making time period, then the grants will get awarded. Assuming Idea Tech receives the award, then they will start the deployment, but the matching funds wouldn't have to be expended until they actually are a recipient of the state and federal funds. Yeah.
But Deborah, would your paperwork say that these funds would be made available to anybody that receives this grant for Reno County? Because I'm not willing to restrict this to one vendor. You see where I'm coming from? If
Yeah, I think the number we talked about yesterday.
Ron Hurst Fiber Company wants to try to have this grant, I don't think it's in our interest to pick vendors. You see what I'm
Correct.
saying?
I think every vendor should have the opportunity, and I think a number we talked about yesterday was, for example, if $25 per premises was committed as matching funds to help with the grant, that's a potential of up to $25,000. Not every one of those premises gets served in Reno County necessarily, because maybe not everyone opts into Idea Tech, but at least it gives the opportunity to get it to that last mile. But you're right, there could be another broadband vendor out there that rears their hand and says, hey, I'm applying for Reno County as well. Could I ask for the same consideration? And I think we would need to give that.
Yeah,
Yes.
See, my point was that in our ARPA money, we had some individual profit-oriented places ask for money, and we pretty much stayed away from that. And I'm not going to pick who gets this grant, and I don't think you should either, as far as
But I
chamber
think
funds.
Only one would get awarded Reno County service territory at the end of the day.
But I think also that there is another vendor that I think we need to know as county officials what area they're looking at and who they serve and what the needs are in the area that they serve, not just to go into one area that maybe has capabilities, that just because it's cheaper. I think the object is to spread this out into areas that are not have that capability that could potentially grow by having it. But yes, I agree with you that any vendor should have that, but I think we need the control over which, when they come in, tell me which area you're in, and if they don't serve that area, the area that's needed, then I think we should have the option of some type of control over that.
I think that we leave that in Deborah's hands because we're leaving it for Growth Inc. to decide how the money is spent and so forth. I think if we don't want to make that decision, we shouldn't tell her how to write the proposal.
I think we're down to 9 days until the grant is due, so I think there's the clock's ticking.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think
You're
you
welcome.
understand where the 2 votes on the county commission is at this point.
Okay, then
Thank you.
we'll take this up as the Economic Development Advisory Council.
Let me go get the chair.
Thank you.
As far as a letter of support, I'll work with Randy on getting that, but I think we can work it so it looks really, really good.
Well, I thank you for the information provided and putting up with a guy that's figured a little slow on how this money funnels, okay?
I really appreciate everyone's help, especially the staff. You know, it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
We're ready for the next item.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is 7A, wildfire mitigation grant discussion. Adam?
Good morning, Commissioners. Adam Weiss, our Emergency Management Director. And with me today is also Chief Beer with Hutchinson Fire Department back there in the back. Back in 2021, the Board of County Commissioners tasked Emergency Management to come up with recommendations for the Commission for coordination and mitigation of wildfires. We had several individuals meet the first Wednesday every month, and those have continued. It's everyone from the Kansas Forest Service, USDA Rangeland Management, Agriculture Extension Agent, Hutchinson Planner, Reno County Planner, Hutchinson Fire Department, Sheriff's Office, District Attorney, and many others. This group put together a document and presented it to the Commission earlier this year to discuss what our recommendations were. In those recommendations, we talked about some of the property owners with small parcels that don't know how to properly take care of their land or do not have the ability to do so. Our recommendation was for the county to come up with some sort of funding source or tax incentive to help those individual property owners with some sort of fuel mitigation. This would allow the residents with the smaller parcels to contract with someone to take care of their fuel load on their property. This could be done through mechanical removal or controlled burning, or it could be a combination of both. By helping these property owners, it would be expensive for the county, but it would save a lot of money in comparison to the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we spend every year on suppression activities and wildfire response. During the Cottonwood Complex, we applied for and were approved for a fire management assistant grant. The fire management assistant grant was basically in direct correlation to our suppression activities. We'll reimburse suppression activities that we did during that fire. On the heels of that FMAG, or the Fire Management Assistant Grant, we also can qualify for mitigation dollars from the state. In May, we talked with the Board of County Commissioners and were approved to submit a letter of intent to the Kansas Division of Emergency Management for wildfire mitigation funding. That letter was actually required to be submitted before we knew what the application process would look like or the amount of money that was available for funding. We submitted that letter, and in total, that letter was approximately 75 pages long, so it's pretty lengthy and in-depth. KDEM, or the Kansas Department of Emergency Management, has responded to that letter, and they stated from the FMAG, or the Fire Management Assistant Grant, the state labels each disaster that we have. That's FM 5425. That's our disaster number. There's approximately $786,000 available for mitigation. To qualify for that mitigation, that $786,000, there's a 25% local match, which is approximately $262,000. Since we submitted that letter of intent, the state has also told us if we expend that entire $786,000 with the local match, they'll make 2 additional disasters available to us, which means we can apply for funding for 2 additional disasters. and those have an approximate 10% local match requirement. So all in all, the federal cost share would be $1,328,742. The local cost share to receive that funding is $323,561, bringing a cumulative total just over $1.6 million. If you look at $1,200 per acre cleared, that would clear approximately 1,375 acres in the county. Especially during budget season, I know $326,000 seems like a lot of money, but when you compare that to what we spent in the recent years, it's really kind of a drop in the bucket. If you look at Cottonwood Complex, we're north of $500,000 on that one for suppression activities. You go back to the Highlands Fire is close to $2 million in suppression activities.
Go back to how many acres would this amount of money possibly help?
Approximately 1,375 acres.
And a total for 1,375 acres, how much does it cost?
That's about $1.6 million. It's approximately $1,200 per acre to clear. We don't have enough funding for the whole county or for all our at-risk areas. If approved for this funding, we would focus on the highest populated, high-risk areas. If you draw a line basically from over here from the Highlands across to Bueller and then down south towards Haven, those are our highest at-risk populated areas. It's just on here for a discussion item today, so I figure we can answer some
When do you
questions.
need a
for it.
decision on this, Adam?
I don't have a timeline right now.
Okay, so we've got the money if we accept the grant and somehow figure out how to pay our share. Is that what you're saying?
Before we have to submit an application to the state stating that we have the local cost share available before it's considered.
Okay, so I think that's probably what's on the commission's mind is where do we come up with our cost share, Randy?
The only place that we probably have is in the Capital Improvement Reserve Fund. There's $3.4 million that's available right now. There's other things kind of in the works that some of that's going to go toward courthouse and other building needs. But if the commission wanted to take the $323,561, we probably can make that work.
Do we still have an opportunity in the budget cycle to fund this through an increase in the fire district's budgets?
Fire districts, most of those districts already are having mill levy increases, and they don't have a lot of valuation.
Well, don't we
could-
have like District 2?
District 2's budget is really City of Hutchinson's budget, and we pay a percentage, about 23%. So for that district to be charged, we would need to probably work with the City of Hutchinson on that one.
Well, this seems like a part of fire protection costs. I don't know why it wouldn't be put in that budget.
Though, well, all the different districts are independent. We'd probably have to have the money up front somewhere. That's where the county could have it. If you wanted to repay that fund, we probably then could set up some amount per fire district, depending on which fire districts are going to benefit. And it may be mainly District 2, 3, and Bueller. I'm not sure.
And a piece of it would probably hit that Burton territory that comes into the county as well.
Adam, this doesn't have to be the full amount. Is that correct? Let's say that there's only interest for $200,000.
That's
That
correct.
could be done.
It doesn't have to be the full amount. It can be whatever the commission decides they're comfortable with that cash match. In addition to that, we can do some in-kind work where we work with our fire districts and Hutchinson Fire Department to see how much in-kind work we think we can come up with to make a dollar amount as well.
I, as a landowner, just putting myself as a landowner, I would be more than willing to pay that 25% if I could get another 75% covered. And I don't think it's the county's responsibility for this. I think it's an individual parcels owner's responsibility for this. I can't see general coming up with 300 and some $1,000 when I think an individual homeowner, even an individual pasture owner, who's going to get that kind of 3-to-1, that I think that would be an incentive right there for the individual owner. And I go back to the fact that I think it should be individuals putting up that 25% rather than the whole taxpayer money. That's my feelings on it, because I really think that if you care about your property and get a chance for $3 for every $1 that you're going to spend, and value your home and value your property and increase the capabilities on ranch land for increase in animal unit grazing, then I think that's a pretty good deal to support those people that want to do this.
Okay, I thought we had to decide on this today, and I apologize, I didn't realize it's for discussion only. Commissioner Hurst, I kind of like your comment on some landowners' responsibility, but wouldn't it still take us to make the commitment for some money, but be able to get some money back for that 25% as the project proceeds?
And we'd have to figure out how to, I think it's going to be a challenge getting on private property and encouraging some of these landowners to do some of this work. But on the backside of things, it could be a big challenge for us to have some sort of application process and then submit it to the state saying, you know, the county's going to be the overall applicant. These are the areas we're focusing on. And I don't think it's going to be a big benefit to us if we're picking and choosing different parcels that want to participate or don't want to participate. I think our biggest benefit is to get a large swath of the county where it's essentially going to be a large break where we know that this area is taken care of for our firemen.
But you still have to have those individuals agree to it.
Correct.
I think that will be the situation.
Well,
Do we have the resources in your department to handle this grant? It sounds like to me that between your department and maybe Chief Beer's department, there's going to be a lot of work involved to decide where and how and who gets a bid to clear. And do we even have the resources to do this?
I think we could work on the where and how. The hardest piece, I think, is going to be getting on private property. And then if there's any sort of cost share with the local homeowner, I don't know if we have the capacity for that.
So what's the deadline for this?
I don't currently have a deadline.
Well, then there's plenty of time to go out and inquire on landowners and let them have some notice on it to see if they're interested, isn't there?
We can ask some of them. I don't know if me going door to door, I don't really have the capacity
No.
for that either.
No, but I think, you know, there's sources to get that information out. You know, for instance, you've got Farm Bureau that could get that information out. And you've got other developers, landowners out there that could get that word out. I would like to see that tried.
Could you or Chief Beer relate, are we talking about in certain high-risk areas trying to create a 300-foot opening? I'd like to know what your attempts would be for clearing. Chief Beer, can you add to that, or maybe Adam couldn't do it by himself?
Stephen Beer, Fire Chief, City of Hutchinson. Commissioner, going back to your question here, I was just appointed to be part of the Governor's Wildland Task Force here a week ago, and we got our second meeting coming up here in September. Represents pretty much 24, 25 different agencies in the state of Kansas. And so that committee actually is almost like an offshoot of what Adam has been doing here in Reno County already for the last numerous months with a lot of local people here. But getting back to your point, I think I totally agree with Adam's assessment here. It is going to be very difficult with with private landowners. And the reason I say that is that just my observation here and talking to some people. And I remember you, Commissioner, talking to a person about one of my last meetings that owned a bunch of cedar trees and says, well, they're not going to burn. Well, outfitting, number one, is a huge thing in Reno County. A lot of landowners, especially in this area, lease their land for $5,000, $7,000, $20,000 a year to outfit out-of-state hunters. That's real money. That's vacations to Mexico or wherever the family chooses to go to. And they love them cedar trees and stuff like that because it brings in a lot of money for these individuals. And so when you have pockets of that all over, they're not willing to give that up. What this committee that we've been working on is to identify these high-risk areas. And I'll just use like 30th Street or Plum Street. We just can't pick and choose a property here and a property there. That's not going to do nothing for us. We got to develop a corridor. Maybe it's from the city limits down to Beeler Haven Road on 30th Street that we make, instead of an 80-foot buffer, we got like a 500-foot buffer working with landowners in them areas. Same with Plum. So we got a defendable space where we can cut these fires off. They're going to still happen. They happen. We're still running them weekly here right now, how dry it is. They still go on. And so that's not going to change, but we're looking for areas that we can defend and cut these things off and work with the landowners in that capacity. Because if we just do these individual properties sporadically in these areas, we're not going to get nothing, if that makes sense. And so we got to have a effort together, a joint effort with the landowners, with the property owners, and come up with something that's going to work. In addition to that, we have to get in these subdivisions or we have these higher populated areas, and just maybe we have a chipper weekend where we bring in a chipper and the people can cut down the stuff. That's everybody that I've talked to in these rural areas out here that own these farmettes. They buy these 3 to 5, 10-acre properties, but they don't have the equipment to maintain. I want to make that very clear. They don't have the equipment to maintain their properties in this capacity. They don't have the tractors, they don't have the saws, they don't have the stuff to do that type of stuff. And so I've been doing a lot of research this way as part of the committee, a lot, especially in Colorado, Wyoming, even Oklahoma, Nebraska. They do a lot of these weekend type things in these areas where, again, they let the homeowners cut down the debris, they haul them to the edge, and like I said, it's called a chipper weekend in this community subdivision. And they remove tons and tons of actually habitat or burning fuel that is around some of the properties. If we could get every home to maintain 100 feet, 200 would be great. We wouldn't have these issues as far as burning down the number of homes that we continually have happen here. Kansas Forestry Service, I just had a meeting here, what was it, last Wednesday, and we were at it here, and they identified this area as one of the worst areas in the state of Kansas.
What do you
wildland
feel
firefighting.
your statewide group, do you see an approach that they'll be moving for?
I think it's going to be the mitigation dollars and how to best utilize mitigation dollars that are coming.
So eventually they'll ask for some state funds for mitigation.
Yeah, I think that's going to be ultimate goal. Again, like Adam said, this problem is not going away, and it's a geographic area. It's totally different than Commissioner Hurst's area on the western part of the state. Everything is totally different about this area, from the way we fight it to the way we handle different things. And so the concept that the Kansas State Forestry Service analogy they used right now was that for homeowners with their cedar trees is basically having a fuel truck parked with jet fuel next to your house. And that's what they're telling people nowadays, is having a fuel truck. And that's a pretty uncomfortable thought. These things are, besides taking all the water out of the ground, all the stuff they drink on a daily basis, they are very dangerous. And, 6 days after the first frost starts wildfire season in the state of Kansas here. So when we have that first frost in October, it's going to be game on again here till next spring. And so used to here, from my understanding here, used to be just a spring thing, and now we're seeing it to be a October and through the entire year. In fact, July was the only time this last year that the airplane out of Hutchinson did not fly in a wildfire.
So it feels like we still don't have a plan to use this money? I mean, I'm seeing $1.6 million that we could get. And, you know, I don't know that anyone here is saying no at this point to that money, but we don't have a plan on where to use it, and it just seems like whatever you said, Adam, 1,200 acres or whatever is a drop in the bucket as far as the amount of acres that we have to mitigate. And like the point of like a fire corridor makes some sense if we had a plan for that, if we had to, at some point, like I get the, like, hey, let's get some landowners to pitch in and help with this, and I think we can, make a slight dent, but it's clear that certain landowners are not going to deal with the issue. And so from a government's perspective, like, what do we do? Like your idea of creating a corridor, if we have to buy, easement to maintain a larger section or whatever, just to protect the greater community, that makes more sense. Otherwise, it seems like we're just going to spend another $1.6 million and not do anything to the situation.
So the 1.6 definitely is not even close to enough to address the issues we have. With the 1.6, what we'd do is we'd look at our high-risk populated areas, again, from basically the Highlands all the way to Bueller, and figure out, look at all the data. What have we done the past 20, 30 years? Where have all these large fires been? And use that historical data and attack those high-risk areas first.
But even then, like, if we have 1,000 acres to abate, like, seems like one of the first questions we need to answer is how many acres are out there that we have to abate. Like, if it's 40,000 acres or something, like, if we spend work on 1,000 acres just randomly, that seems like it'll do nothing. Like, if it's that large of a problem, we need a strategic plan to, like, strategically, like, create a corridor or something to just start with like the most critical issue first. So, like, to me, I would like I support finding the money for this. I think taxpayers need to help fund this protection. It's going to kill more people. It's going to damage more property. So I support that. But my personal opinion is we need a plan from you guys after an assessment of how big of an issue this is from a dangerous acreage perspective, and then tell us strategically how we can use this $1.6 million.
And we have maps available through the Forest Service. They're just not for public consumption yet, that show the most at-risk areas. And like you said, that 1.6 is really going to be a drop in the bucket. If we identify those areas, we would have to figure out some sort of funding mechanism coming forward, because rough numbers, I bet we're 15 to 20 times what that 1.6 is going to do.
Commissioner Friesen, aren't you asking for a plan? Okay, that 43rd North and wherever, you're asking for kind of a plan on where the corridors might be to things like this that would help the most?
Well, the drop in the bucket analogy, that, like, I don't want to do that. Like, that seems like a total waste. Like, tell us how we can get the most bang for our buck. Like, just randomly abating some property doesn't seem like it's, but we don't know that either, right? You can't tell me that there's, like, you have some maps. So if you could come back and say, the maps say, like, at the highest risk, we've got 80,000 acres. In medium risk, 100,000 acres. If you could get us that, then we know what we're up against. And then tell us, like, how strategically we abate this, because it doesn't feel like clearing 1% of the land will do us any good.
We can come up with maps, and I can come up with acres, and it's just, to me, it's getting commission on board where we have to start somewhere. 1.6 may not seem like a lot, but it's a lot more than what we had before. 1,300 acres is a lot more than what we had in 2022.
Well, I'm on board. I just want you to tell us how we use it strategically. So,
Commissioner, I think you go back to the 1%, and I take a look at that 1%. If I can have 1% on a major fire break running down 30th, I'll take that 1% any day of the week because it gives me a fighting chance and my men and women a fighting chance. We are not going to get every property owner to understand. After every one of these fires, we have educational seminars where we bring people in, and nobody wants to listen. They're very poorly attended until it happens to them. And when you tell people that the reason your house burned down is because you had cedar trees planted right around your home, I can take you right out on Victoria, some of the dead end roads there, why some of them homes that are standing there, because they had metal roofs on. There was all oak trees and maple trees in their yard. There was not one cedar tree within 100, 200 feet of their homes, and them homes are standing today. Every one that didn't is down to the ground. And to get homeowners to truly understand that, but for us here because we know these fires are going to continue to happen, and so if we can take that 1-2% and identify these breaks, we have a map of 20 years of history. And history does repeat itself. We've got GIS plotted out every one of our big fires that we've had, and there are key pinch points and where they cross over the roads time and time again here. And so we have all that data, and even like in the Highlands, or not the Highlands, out by Prairie Dunes Golf Course, we did risk assessments on every one of them homes. And I don't release it to the public, but every one of them homes from the street, we did a risk analysis. That home is marked green, yellow, or red. If it's red, we can't defend that home. There's nothing that we're going to do if we have a fire come through there to defend that home.
well, why do you tell, why don't you make that public?
Because you'll have every neighbor pitting against every neighbor. When I'm a green and you're a red, and that neighbor is it's lessons learned from out west. They tried that whole thing. They even tried painting mailboxes. You had a green dot if you were a good, and a red dot, well, people would change the paint on the mailboxes, and everything happened. But it pitted neighbors against neighbors, and so. But we go out there. We've had 4 or 5 educational campaigns right out in the neighborhood out there, working with the landowners and telling them, but if they don't listen, they don't listen, and there's only so much we can do at our end. But we've made major progress out there too, and the same thing. If you go back out there and you look, over the last 4 years out there, there's been a ton of work that's been accomplished out there.
Well, why wouldn't you want the homeowner to know that their house is red?
We'll tell the homeowner that, but I don't want.
Do they know? Do all of our homeowners in Reno County know if their home's undefendable?
No.
Okay.
I would say if you have cedar trees within 100 feet of your home, it's not defendable. And we've been preaching that since day one here in Reno County.
It sounds like you have pinch points. You've identified like the 30th Street corridor has been said 3 or 4 times now. So it sounds like you have some strategic focus that we could bring back here that I think would help us just understand that the funding will be used as efficiently as possible to help us with our decision.
And I think you have the recommendations from the committee that the committee did bring to you guys. Is that correct?
Yeah, we presented to the Board of County Commissioners a couple months ago, all the recommendations from the Coordination Mitigation Wildfire Committee.
And those are in there. It tells us how to spend this money.
Some of it, I believe, there's recommendations for different things. Maybe not the fine details of the exact road crossing or stuff like that, but.
Well,
I guess what we really want is some sort of direction from the commission before we spend a whole bunch of time putting together maps and documents. We want some sort of direction from the commission saying that our time isn't going to be wasted or our work is going to be taken into consideration, and we will probably fund this. I'm not saying that you will fund it. We'd like some sort of direction, knowing that our efforts will be wasted.
I've got one more question. You can't have 1,000-gallon fuel tank sitting on your property in the middle of Hutch, right? Okay. And the reason you can is because there's a law created that you can't do that, right? Is that true?
So there's planning and zoning that goes into a lot of this too. We got in pretty detailed discussions with both the Hutchinson planner and the Reno County planner on what zoning looks like in the county as well.
So there, a part of this could be, like, I hate when the government tells me what to do. Don't like it. But I don't want to see the local government continue to risk resources, funding, people, homes, and not address this more specifically. I mean, they're, like, especially in these corridor routes, if landowners don't want to give us a buffer, we may have to create a resolution to deal with it. Like, I hate doing that, but it's just, the definition of insanity is, doing things over and over and expecting a different result, and that's where we're at with this fire issue. And so, like, I think what we need is a more refined recommendation from you to get, like, an affirmation. Like, if you want to vote today on whether we want to spend $323,000 for this, I would vote yes for it. I think it would be better to show us the plan, though, how we're going to use it. What do you guys think?
I would say that I got a lot of good comments from the presentation at the Farm Bureau meeting that was given there regarding fire and protection and so forth. That was,
Does it say when the 300 and some thousand has to be provided, or is it part of the 3-year grant or something? Or?
It's usually part of the grant cycle whenever.
And this is going to be a multi-year.
It'll be a multi-year cycle.
Well, I think we need to fund it. It seems to be that we're getting drier. Seems to me the climate's changing somewhat, and these events are not going to go away unless we start working on it in some way, shape, or form. My experience at the county is that we have some quality department heads that, given an opportunity to plan and do a good job, can do a good job. I've been very impressed with most of the department heads here at the county, including Adam, Chief Beer, who works for the city. And while this is, to me, I don't believe this is on here for a vote today. I think we ought to bring it back fairly quickly for a vote by the commission. We've got to do something, and we just aren't doing enough. And I like Chief Beer's chipper week or chipper day or something like that. That seems like it's pretty easy to handle, I would think. I would think that Chief Beer and Adam would like to spend more time on getting rid of the risk than going out there than fighting the risk. And in this world, that seems to be a job to do. So I think we'd be remiss that if we don't get going on this project.
Okay, how about this? How about we we'll work on rescheduling a decision here in the next month. I'd appreciate if the other commissioners sent Randy specific feedback on what they'd like to see. And Randy, if we could have staff come back, in a month or so with a more precise recommendation of how we spend this money.
And Commissioner Friesen, when I do come back, I'll bring our application packet with us.
Okay.
That application packet actually gets a whole lot more in depth to what we're doing, but we didn't want to spend the time and fill out the application packet if there is no interest from the commission.
Yeah, and I think what we're looking for is a summary. We don't need the whole packet yet. one-page summary of where you're going to focus your work, and I think then you could probably get an official affirmation. But it sounds like you have maybe 2.5 votes here as it stands today. But
I need much more information. I want to know, okay, you got 80,000 acres out there. How are you going to attack this portion where you want? I want to know how many people potentially would use a chipper. I want to know how many potential, what areas you would be recommended using it on.
maybe 2.25. Well, Commissioner Hurst, what I recommended we do is accumulate all of our questions, give them to Randy, and he'll work with staff, and then in the next month they'll get back to us. Does that sound good?
Yeah, but I'm just saying that's what I want to see on.
Okay.
I'm still very dependent upon individuals doing this instead of the county.
Adam, any other comments
That's it.
you have? Okay, Chief Beer. Okay. That's a good start. Appreciate your guys' work. Understand it's a very serious issue, and I hope you understand we take it seriously here too. So thank you. Okay, 7B. Randy, is this you?
This is
Or Helen. Helen, welcome, Helen.
Good morning, Helen Foster, HR Director. We have in front of you the 2022-2023 plan premiums. It's the schedule that we're recommending for the new health and dental insurance. This year we are recommending to stay flat just due to the pressures of inflation for our employees. We have, I've worked with Randy and Leslie, and so looking at the funding and what we're bringing in, it seems that we would be in good shape to go ahead and keep the premiums flat. So these are the exact same premiums that employees and the county are currently paying. So this is with no increase. Right now, the employees are funding 15.63% of the benefit plan. And then the county, of course, is funding the rest.
Well, how much is the premium going up next year?
The premiums at this point the stop loss hasn't been set yet completely. But we know there's going to be a slight increase. However, we are losing, we have what they call a laser for one of our
Sure.
individuals. And so we're
Understand.
losing that laser this year too. So we're not going
So
to have
you're
a laser.
making this recommendation without knowing what next year's premiums are going to be?
We know that there's going to be an increase on the stop loss, but we don't know exactly how much. No.
Commissioner, we know the maximum, I guess, exposure that we should have, but with being a self-insured, we don't really have a true premium that they charge us. There's different rates they charge us, but the overall expected claims cost is going up about 10.5%, I believe.
Yeah.
But that's the worst case scenario.
So if it goes up 10.5%, the percentage that the county is funding is going to go up that proportion, correct?
On actual claims, we
Yeah.
may pay. But the premium that we charge ourselves goes from basically the employee benefits fund into the self-insurance fund. Kind of as we talked about when we talk about budget, those two pots of money, that's where the county's contribution is set.
Well, I think I understand all that, but if our expected costs are going to go up 10.5%, it seems like to me that it's not appropriate not to charge the employees somewhat more. Now, I'm not saying what amount, but that this thing isn't going to change next year, so next year you're going to have to double the increase for the employee instead of doing nothing. You can't maintain the balance if your costs are going up and not taking in more income each year, correct?
Yes. Yes, with inflation and cost for employees, the recommendation was to leave it flat and use a little bit of that cash reserve if we needed to. That's set in the employee benefits fund and self-insurance fund.
Well, some of us think that cash reserve is higher than it needs to be, but even saying that,
And the amount on the spreadsheet that shows what is coming in, the 4.593 million, that does not include the premiums that we collect for retiree premiums, which account for about $61,000 each year.
okay, do I have that spreadsheet? I just got 2 pages.
Yep, that right there.
On the
So,
second page.
just below
Oh,
the
okay.
chart, yeah, that'll show you the employee and employer. And then this is just the total, the 4.353, that's just for health premiums. And then the total collected between health and dental is 4.593 million. Which doesn't account for the fact that retiree premiums, we collect about $61,000 each year. Part-time surcharge accounts for about $5,000 each year. And then the tobacco surcharge accounts for $41,200 each year.
I just expressed a long-term problem you're gonna have with the employee benefits fund, so.
We're also, another component is the stop loss, that money that we're gonna be getting in
Oh,
sometime
yes.
this year that's going to help the self-insurance fund by about $500,000 for the stop loss, the way that, with the insurance, that we're gonna get money back.
As for the aggregate stop-loss claim.
And that's a refund?
Mhm.
Okay, that's all the questions I got. Is somebody gonna make a motion to approve this, or?
I would move to approve the premium schedule for 2023 health insurance plan year as presented by staff.
Motion approved by Commissioner Hurst. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Sellers. Any final discussion?
There's numerous county employees in the audience today. In my opinion, all we're doing is putting off your increase that will show up in year 2, 3, or 4. So I think it's bad policy, but that's what the recommendation is, and I'll vote for it. I won't be here when you have to double the increase next year.
I'm not sure about doubling, but I think there will be some increases have to pass along at some time.
I call for the question.
It's a call for the question. I have to ask for a vote on the call. If
You do.
Okay. There's a call for the question. So what we're about to vote on is whether we vote on the motion immediately. So roll call please for the call for the question.
Commissioner Hurst?
Yes.
Commissioner Sellers?
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen?
No. Motion passes 2-1. Roll call please on the actual question.
On the actual motion?
Yes.
Commissioner Hurst?
Yes.
Commissioner Sellers?
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen?
Yes. Pushy sometimes.
Doesn't make that complicated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Item 7C is the 2023 budget discussions. Randy?
The budget's been discussed the past few meetings. At the last meeting, the commission requested a spreadsheet to be sent with, I guess, the areas that I felt could be cut or different as options, along with, you requested my recommendation, a range and my recommendation. This was sent out a couple weeks ago, and here's kind of the view for the comparison of the three commissioners of where you were at as of yesterday in conversations. The first one was the capital improvement program fund budget. There's a line item that has $500,000 that's earmarked for the courthouse facade, the anchoring of the facade. That has also been discussed in commission meetings. There's $500,000 earmarked again. And this would be whether you want to do anything next year with the anchoring or in future years. Do minimal amount, which maybe $200,000 or $300,000, or do nothing. My recommendation was to, if you wanted to make cuts, to take $200,000 out of it and leave at least $300,000. Daniel, I believe, mentioned removing it all. Commissioner Sellers and Commissioner Hurst both $200,000. So with this matrix, that was the first item, but I wanted to see, are you guys wanting to kind of debate among yourselves, or me to give more information about the consequences of these cuts?
Give us our timetable again. That when is it we have to have
August
a final?
30th is the public hearing. That's been set for the revenue neutral rate hearing and the public budget hearing. To have the actual document ready, the budget form that would look like this, to have this ready, it'd be best to have the numbers of the cuts known before the 30th. Because if at that time you can approve the budget, but we'll have to take our recess, go back and have staff work with double checking all the calculations and changes that we've made.
Okay, thank you.
Personally, I'd like to see some discussion on this now, and so maybe we could come up with some agreements. At
Let's
least talk
discuss
about it.
Randy, you want us to go line by line?
I think if these are the main cuts or discussions, yes. Or if you want to actually get into the budget and have other discussions about other items. But I guess the range, I kind of showed, I'll go back real quick before you start in that discussion, a range of cuts between $0 and $2.4 million. The $2.4 million would handicap our budget for future years. That would be cutting every bit of possibility, I think, making next year's budget a lot harder. And then I had my recommendations of what I felt maximum for each category, and that came up to $736,000 in cuts. And then Commissioner Friesen had $1.4 million in cuts, Commissioner Sellers $995,000, and Commissioner Hurst $808,000. So
I've made a few changes to mine. I've added a few more cuts.
So if you guys want to go line by line, and then I'll make adjustments here, and if that's what you guys decide on, we can prepare the budget for the August 30th meeting.
I'd like to skip number one because it seems more flexible or less controversial than the others. It might be an area we could use to make up some difference if we have to. So number two is the special equipment fund for vehicle replacement. Randy, you're, and just to be clear, especially for the public, the numbers on here are basically reductions or cuts.
Correct. These are cuts to the actual budget, or as we get to outside agencies, it's cuts to the increase.
So the higher the number, the higher the cut. So So there's $334,000 $1,000 in vehicles. There's different ways to cut that within the different subcategories. Does anyone see a path forward on this? We're pretty close.
I've increased mine on this because in discussions and conversations with the vehicles that I've increased mine. I've cut quite a bit out of this. I'll just run it down. On the sheriff's part, I had no cut due to manufacturer's increase. Is this okay to go through?
Sure.
Expected increases in the cost of vehicles. Jail, I cut that 20,000. I cut it down to 13,000. Jail, I think we in all of these vehicles, I think we take real good care of them. The county vehicle department takes repair maintenance, takes a lot of vehicles. I don't think just because they catch 100,000 miles means we need to get another vehicle. I think we need to look at the individual vehicles. Maintenance, I cut that down to cut it down 20,000, and mainly because increased in there to potentially set aside that maybe in 2 or 3 years we can, and we do a lot of transferring of vehicles from one department to another, and as they need, that they're still good, but there's some departments that have to have one more reliable, less mileage vehicles.
Commissioner, just to clarify, so on the number, as I put on here on cuts for the jail, their request is 33,000, so you put it down to 20,000?
Put it down to 13.
13, okay.
And I need clarification too, because you can't really buy half a car. Are you suggesting buy used cars or what?
This is a fund to replace vehicles as they're needed, capital improvement fund. So in just cutting the amount of carryover in the fund, because that makes sense.
Well, I think you're looking at it differently than I was. And Randy, maybe you can clarify, because to me, I was looking at it as buying these vehicles and the amount needed to buy the vehicle.
That's what the budget requests were. All the directors worked with Kyle, which I think Kyle is here, to explain the costs of the vehicles. So for maintenance, that, I can't guess, 28,000, that's for one new vehicle. The 33,000 for the jail is one new vehicle. So by cutting 20,000, so for the jail to 13.
Thanks for
What's your
correcting.
total new cut?
116.
Well, I think you could summarize, what I heard from the vehicle department was, or even the department, youth shelter could wait another year. They volunteered that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's an easy one. I think everybody got to their health department, said they needed one, right? But it may be on the fence, looks like. The appraiser could wait a year. Is that what I heard?
That's in talking with Kyle, yes, that was one of his recommendations to me, that the appraiser and the youth shelter could both
Emergency
wait.
management's driving around a 2008, which I think is a fair request to
I left
replace.
that in.
Yeah. Maintenance, let's leave that up. The sheriff, I suggested 3 out of 4. I think that was a compromise to the difference in philosophy between the sheriff and the vehicle department. But I could get around to funding all of it. That seems like one point. Maintenance. What was the point on maintenance? They could wait, or
That one was not recommended to wait, I think. And Kyle was that, and Harlan, Kyle, maintenance was one you had left in there,
Yeah,
wasn't
you
it?
didn't do that maintenance.
They said they needed it. But
So you're at 62,000, correct then?
I'm at 97.
97.
Unless,
Well, I was looking, you said appraiser and you shelter
And sheriff.
sheriff,
just now.
sheriff, only one, cut one, let him pick what he wants to do between the jail and the sheriff office.
Look
Kyle,
at,
what was the
look
cost
at,
of one for the sheriff?
Ron, look at Daniel's
Is it
total
35,
column.
750?
97.5,
Yeah.
750. You're cutting 32, I did 95.
Just to move the conversation along, which
I'd go
seems
with
to
that.
drag a little bit, I would support Daniel Friesen's thoughts on this issue, on this item.
On the cuts that he has listed
Yes.
there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm coming up with what you just said, I'm coming up 95, so I'm not worried about it.
Hey, Sheriff, can you deal with 3 out of 4?
Of your fleet replacement, 3 out of 4 vehicles next year replaces.
Well, you know, we keep. Darren Campbell, Reno County Sheriff. So each year when we come before the commission to discuss our bids and what we're doing with our vehicles, it seems like we're always picking it apart. We're picking it down. We're going to a 5-year rotation. Now we're cutting vehicles. How do we get this back? Do we have a plan to get better equipment? If we start running them, because we don't drive them like a normal person. I think you guys, gentlemen, have seen that. So they are driven pretty hard, and when they start getting 100, 150,000 miles on them or something, they
Well,
tend to have a little bit more problems.
Well, I guess where I was coming from was, one, I think vehicles last longer than they used to. 2, there was a bit of a disagreement between you and Kyle on whether replacements were needed this year on all of them. And so the compromise... Kyle, come up and tell us if I'm speaking out of turn.
First of all, I couldn't read the numbers from back there.
So
The sheriff-
the question is, the sheriff has 3 vehicles plus the jail, so 4 total vehicles to be replaced next year. Is that right?
4 in the sheriff and 1
4
in the jail.
4 plus 5. Sorry,
And my thought is
4
that
plus 4.
the F-150 pickup, I think we can put that off another year.
Okay.
It currently has 84,000 miles, I believe, on it. Maintenance costs shouldn't go up at all. Cost in trade value, I'm guessing would be about $1,500, $2,000.
Okay.
But
That was where I was, 4 out of 5. But you disagree with Kyle. So
Well, I guess what I'm saying, I put it in that perspective, I understand a little bit better than just, cutting a car off our budget.
Yeah. That's
The 4 out of 5, I understand that. The truck is pretty low miles based on trade-in value, and I think it could go another year, absolutely. And that would even throw it into our 5-year rotation, would it?
yes.
Okay.
that's
So I understand that a little bit better.
okay. Great.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you, Sheriff. Like, you need good equipment and all that. So so if we're moving on to outside agencies, we're all pretty close on the numbers, but the where to take it from, I think we're off a little bit. Anyone want to take a shot at that? I'll take a shot. I think emergency communication is important, and I understand the costs are increasing, but they've dramatically increased over the last couple of years, and I feel like they could they could handle where they're at without increasing another 100,000. And Randy indicated in our discussions they often don't utilize their entire requested budget.
That's correct. It wouldn't change the communications budget and we still would be paying 50% of what the city approves, but in our budget, we would take the 95,000 off of that budget because they haven't been getting close to spending the amount that they've requested the past few years with vacancies.
So my other comments, I think Startup Hutch had a soft 5-year commitment from all of the funding agencies, including the Hutch Community Foundation, and so I wouldn't support cutting that outside of that 5-year commitment, even though we can. The other ones, I'm not as close to some of the Conservation District or Extension Council, so I'm pretty flexible if somebody makes a good argument on that. And I generally like to hold the line on economic development just because I feel like we're getting some momentum there. So that's where I was at. So I took most of it from emergency communication. Seems like we all agree on the museum for whatever reason.
Well, Dan, you're always one to look at individual line items, and when I looked at Startup Hutch's budget for next year, I personally felt like there was some softness in there that they didn't need. Their marketing budget for the size of agency that they are seems out of sync. It's a $40,000 number. I think that's too high. They're also going to have a 6-month carryover of staff. That's a significant training time and so forth. And I'm not willing to support that increase due to the fact that their budget looks like to me it's overstated. But I think we're all in the $100,000 area cut. I cut all the outside agencies except economic development. I cut it some, but I just think the Fair, Startup Hutch, Extension Council, Conservation District, and those people need to not count on the county for increased funds in the future.
I left the county fair in at 2,000. The reason I left the county fair in, their funding at 2,000, not cut, is because of the rental increase that the state fair has added to the cost of leasing the fairgrounds. I kept Startup Hutch at their regular amount, didn't cut any of that because of our 5-year commitment for that. I also agree 100% with Commissioner Sellers that I do not see $40,000 in marketing. I think that's for that agency. I don't see that is getting any return on the investment. I need to know more about that, but I don't think that 40,000, and it's not even utilizing. I think that could be better spent other ways in going out and seeing communities and going out and doing things rather than. I haven't seen any advertising, marketing from that myself, so I agree with that, unless I hear something else. But I left it in because of that commitment. Extension Council, I would like to see a little more done with the Extension Council. I see they need to be out a little more, and maybe I'm missing something on social media or letters or something, but I would like to see more on that and more of what they're doing. Conservation District, we haven't done anything to Conservation District for a long time, so I left that in there. I think they're doing a good job and with very little money. And if you've gone on those tours, I think that's a must for commissioners to go on their conservation tour that they have, so they can find out more about it other than just going to the annual meeting. Museum, I would like to see them do some other fundraising. I took them clear out. We gave them quite a bit of money a couple years ago, and that's stayed in there last year. And so I can't see a raise there.
Well, one way to do this would be to just
I'm real close to where you are when I got done redoing mine after thinking more about it. 108,000. Okay.
why, whenever you're here, tell us why you need $34,000 more. Surprise.
Commissioner Friesen, sorry, you weren't, oh, you're fine. You weren't in the room earlier when they let me speak to this a little bit. So the request is an increase of 34,000 across 3 budgets. Actually holding the line on Market Hutch, we divide the economic development funding that we get from you typically across 2 budgets, Greater Hutch and Market Hutch. This year, we're proposing an increase, but also dividing that across 3 budgets, Greater Hutch, Market Hutch, but adding to that Growth Inc. And Growth Inc. is $20,000 of this increase request, primarily because that is the entity that is working on the K96 Industrial Corridor Development Project. And there are planning activities that need to occur in order to embark on some studies that we need for infrastructure to keep that project moving. If we don't allocate anything to Growth Inc., it really would be a setback to the progress that we're making on the development of that park. And quite honestly, the county has never invested in Growth Inc. in the past. That has entirely in the past been funded by the City of Hutchinson. But I think in all fairness, because this industrial park is in the unincorporated area of Reno County, I do think it's fair to ask the county to kick in something for Growth Inc. The other $14,000 of this request is simply for the community development aspect that we do in Greater Hutch, and we talked about some of that earlier. The most of the dollars that you put into Greater Hutch do not go into staffing, they go into programming, and those programs include everything from housing to childcare to broadband development to community development initiatives that support quality of life in Reno County, and I would say that they're all critical elements. The other big thing that we have ramped up in the last year are workforce initiatives. We've launched a Career Quest program that we're hoping to take county-wide. Most of the funding for Career Quest is coming from the private sector, but I think it's fair that a portion of that is used to support workforce development. So, I can fully defend the $34,000 is a minimal increase in the scope of work that we're doing. We're seeing a greater number of projects, both local project expansions, but also new looks from outside, as you know, and those require staffing to do that. So we are fortunate that about 70% of our funding does come from the private sector, but we do put to use every single dollar you put into our economic development fund.
Did you change your mind?
I'd still cut hers a little bit.
How much?
I would cut it 14,000.
Okay. So, did you change your mind?
Now, what was just said? You said 14,000.
He's at 14.
Her increase, she's requesting 34,000, and I would increase it to 20,000.
So you would increase that to 20,000 to provide those 20,000. What does that? How does that affect the broadband grant?
I would say if, in order to make that whole, what we would need to do, if you're proposing a $14,000 cut, that would be directly pulled from the Market Hutch funds, and we would just not have those dollars for marketing this year, because I do think that the bulk of this is absolutely, and not that it isn't necessary for Market Hutch, but it's absolutely necessary for Greater Hutch and Growth Inc. So if that's the best we can do, that's probably the fund I would pull that from.
Given the unknown that we are at with regarding the inflation unknowns for this coming year on what it might do to sales tax and other things, I'm fine, I'll go with that, but I think it's very imperative that we do this grant for the broadband. So if we go to more than 20,000, I'd be willing to go 25 or something like that.
Number one, I'm not advocating and not involved in the broadband point.
Not meaning you were at all.
But it sounds like 14 is the compromise that we have here between a majority. And with that, Commissioner Sellers, I would suggest that we adopt Commissioner Hurst's lines with the change from 34 to 14. Because I'm kind of in line with his cuts there. Does that sound all right?
Okay, so you're saying 120 decrease?
No, I think it would go down 20.
His decrease was 106,950, so you're adding 14.
Well, I'm changing the 34,000 to 14, so it would actually go down 20. That's not where you're at?
Okay,
I'm
I
down
see.
14 and funding 20,000. Funding
that's-
20,000.
So the cut's only 14,000 from the request?
Yeah.
Okay,
That
these
makes
things
sense.
have to be compromises, and I will be glad to compromise. I think the two of you are wrong on the startup hutch.
Thanks.
We
Duly
made a
noted.
commitment 3 years on that, and we said we'd watch it, and both Commissioner Hurst and I believe that there's funds in there that don't need to be spent, so.
They got better spent elsewhere. I'm not funding it, but I
Okay.
think it's better spent elsewhere.
Okay, maybe they'll change that.
Well,
You
thanks
clear?
for making a priority of the corridor development. I think that's an important investment. While I'm at the podium, can I make one comment?
Sure.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Friesen, even though Ron Sellers shook his head no. I would just like to comment on behalf of a program that is not at all involved with economic development, but is squarely on the chamber side of the house. I want to make sure that the public that might be listening are aware that we have till August 18th to get companies enrolled in the Chamber Blue survey for health insurance. And health insurance is a big cost driver for the county and for every small business. And there is a great possibility that companies, and maybe even including Reno County, could benefit from taking a look at the rate structure under Chamber Blue. So there is still another week or 9 days to get into the Chamber Blue interest survey that's on our website. I know you guys are in a self-funded plan. It might not lower your premiums overall, but there's no harm in filling it out and checking to see if it would save you money. I know that feels like a risk moving from a self-funded plan to a different product, but many of our companies are jumping on board. So I just wanted to make sure that any company, whether you're a chamber member right now or not, can fill out the interest survey on Chamber Blue on the hutchchamber.com website. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Deborah. Randy, did you get the changes noted?
Well,
No, I haven't got them all yet either.
no, I wasn't sure, other than you took 14,000 from economic development or chamber. Did you take
So-
anything from the county fair?
Use Hearst's line item and change that 34,000 to 14.
For the chamber?
Yeah.
Yeah, I took 14,000 out, so they get a $20,000 increase.
Yeah.
So
And then we're adopting this.
$10,000 cut
Yeah.
from extension council, 50 from the communications line item,
Yeah.
and 12, all of the museums increase.
Yeah.
So you have 86,950.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Looks like we're on the general fund. Two of us agree. Commissioner Sellers, you want to make your case there? Are you okay with?
Well, my case there is that I think the public and the commission wants to take care of the courthouse. We don't know yet exactly how much that's going to cost in this remodel project. The commission's also aware of other space needs that are needed by the county, and thus I think cutting the general fund for courthouse and other real estate improvements is going to be a determining factor on what we're able to do, and these things need to be done. And if you don't do them, you're making the county a less viable entity for employees to be working at. We have some situations where we need to provide employees better space needs. And that's why I'm looking at that general courthouse improvement fund to be left intact.
You change your mind?
No, I fully understand where you're coming from, and I see this as a situation as we just witnessed and hearing about and have gained knowledge on space needs. But I would go along with our administrator's request.
Okay.
As suggested.
I'm somewhere in the middle there for a moment, so let's move on to the general fund cash balance. It looks like we're all in agreement there. No changes in your thoughts? Okay. And then the employee benefits fund cash balance. Looks like we're a bit all over the board on that. Randy, do you want to make one more case for this, or have you explained it? Like I feel good about it. You feel like you understand it?
This is a very complex, just for you guys to know, the employee benefits fund is complex because it's tied to the self-insurance fund, but also other taxes. So we budget the maximum amount on percentages for CAPERS, KPNF, FICA, unemployment, so that if we were fully staffed at what we budget the employees and their rates of pay for all year, that's what the cost is.
Are we ever fully staffed?
No, not
okay.
It's very rare. There's a lot of turnover, but we have that number, and then we set that number, which you saw when we talked about the health insurance, that shows, and let me just pull up, it'd be easier to pull this up. Unless you don't want me to talk about it.
I don't know that we need to go into the minutia of this. I think there may be some fundamental disagreements on.
There were some concerns about the cash balance, and as I explained to Commissioner Friesen yesterday, there's $1.8 million budgeted in this fund for cash carryover. The rest of the money, the cash, is technically absorbed in the budget between the resources available and the expenditures. But that's assuming that revenues don't come in higher and expenditures are at 100%. So that's why we usually have that cushion.
But the problem is, you end up with more than double that, like you did last year, and I think you did the year before. So we're not hitting the budget right. I think that's where Commissioner Sellers and I are willing to take a little cut. You're not estimating that right, and I think your point is, well, we need a cushion just in case.
And this is also tied to the health insurance decision. This is where that cushion is for the employee's cost.
But aren't we budgeting the full amount of the expected increase?
You're budgeting the 10% increase, aren't you? In insurance?
The expected claims, but that's a non-budgeted fund. All that comes out of a non-budgeted fund. We're only budgeting $4.8 million of county cost.
Well, you got $5 million carryover, right?
No.
You got 2 million carry.
1.8.
In this fund, we began the year with 5 million. We expect to begin next year at 4 million.
I think this is an area where you could cut it some and watch it. You want to come down to 300?
That's fine.
Okay. You still stuck on 50?
Well, I could come up a little bit, but at 1.8, you're only looking at 20%.
I just
And
don't get. I can't get around the fact that you took in 8.2 and you took out 8, and we have 5 million in carryover. We're expecting another 2 million for 1 point. I'm throwing out too many numbers for anybody to follow, but we're expecting a carryover this year of 1 point.
1.8 is what we budget.
What did we budget last year?
I think it was 2 million.
And
So
we were
cut it.
5.8.
What now?
The actual was 5, right?
That's of the health insurance costs. The costs that we paid to moved over to the health insurance fund. That's where it gets complex because there's the actual where we pay self-insurance or the insurance is actually over here. We began 2021 with 3.3 million and ended the year 3.7 million.
Well, I think we're in agreement at 300. So, is that true?
I think you better be very, very careful about this. Very careful. You can say it looks good on paper, but in real life, I think if you do this, you're going to cause some problems on down the line to cut it that much. Just past.
Okay. Noted.
I'm happy with 300.
Okay. So we've got two.
Just for a sec, I'm not.
Okay. It's
Well,
been
we've all
noted.
compromised in different ways, Ron, and Daniel and I feel that we have an approach, and I think that just as I've agreed with you on certain things that the two of you have agreed on, that you should be willing to understand the two of us think 300 is correct.
You just every once in a while you gotta just take that lecture you get from Commissioner Sellers and move on.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'd agree.
There's two open. One was the general fund cash balance. Sorry, the general fund courthouse improvements. Like I could get around to 100,000 there instead of 200, based on the fact that you don't have to use that. It goes into capital.
Right, it'll help with other, especially if we have to pay for the fire mitigation or something else out of that capital improvement reserve. This will be transferred over at the end of the year.
What if we did this? What if we only cut 100,000 in that, and you guys came up to 300,000 on the cutting the building?
Okay, explain why
You-
you want less than
I don't think we're gonna
200.
do it.
You don't
I don't
think we're
think
gonna
we're
spend
gonna
that?
do it. I don't think. Like I never heard a reason why.
to do it at all.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
hang on, I gotta explain it to Commissioner Hurst. So both of you at the top item here are at 200,000. I'm suggesting you go to 300 and put that money towards just the general fund courthouse improvements. So rather than cutting 200 there, cut 100.
That's a good compromise.
Did you
So
got it?
on which one is this? Is this,
So the top item.
okay, the facade,
We've landed at 300 to cut there.
300 to cut?
Yeah. And then we're gonna come back on
Courthouse
this one
improvements?
to just 100 cut
100.
there. Yeah. It's.
So you made cuts of $814,700.
Where does that put us at the mill levy?
That's the part about the.
Something less
You
than the
can't-
mill
you can't-
levy.
I can.
Can't calculate.
I can
Something
make
a little
it.
bit
It won't
less.
be 100%. I can
Is it gonna go down a bit?
Yeah, right now it's
Yeah, it's got to.
39.475. If I what was that other number? Was it 814?
Yeah.
Say 500. Put it. Oh wait, that's negative.
It's got to be negative.
Take it to 38.2. That's just an estimate because, again, there's other calculations that with the neighborhood revitalization that changed that number.
And where are we at today?
The current budget,
Yeah, 39.4.
39.498.
But that's
The revenue neutral is 37.468.
This is good, but if you all are talking about spending another $330,000 for fire mitigation, where does that come in at?
Well, my suggestion is that they said we probably didn't need to fund that except over the life of that grant, and that grant's going to be a 3-year grant, so you're not talking about 300, you're talking about a third of that probably per year.
Once we
Per
see
year.
the strategy, I would also look at the fire districts that are most impacted to see what we could do with their budgets individually to see if each district could pitch in. Since you guys oversee their budgets also.
That sounds good.
So essentially those fire districts that are affected most, potential that they would raise their mill levy. That's
Or
what you're
use
saying.
or capital reserve, yes.
Take it out of capital reserve. So essentially, to take it out of capital reserve, to replace that capital reserve, you're gonna have to raise the mill levy.
Right, because they have an equipment plan that it would get
Yep.
in the way of.
Good. All right, I think we're done.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I apologize, but I'd like a 5-minute break, please.
5-minute break.
Pretty good writing there, Daniel, all over that page. That's good.
All right, I only had this.
Dad. Patrick, I think I'm gonna write a book.
I wish I could write a book, but I can't. All my good stories are privileged.
So let's go. Shall we?
Okay, we're back from recess. Looks like we're here. We're on item 8. Randy, you said you could make a shorter presentation to keep us on schedule here.
Yes, the only thing I have is what was included in the packet, the financial report and monthly department reports, and wanted to see if there's any questions on that. Those were the only things I was going to mention this morning. So if there's no questions, I don't have anything else.
Doesn't look like it. Thank you. County Commission report, comments? Commissioner Hurst, you want to go first?
I've got about 3 things. Congratulations to Cosmos Fair on getting their award and congratulations and the chamber efforts on getting some potential lodging here that's needed. The other one is the water meeting regarding Yoder Water District, 6:30 Thursday at the Journey Event Center. The other item is this week, I normally don't do week specials, but this week is Farmers Market Week over the nation. And I want to thank the supporters who attend the Farmers Market and the producers who have worked a lot of long hours to provide those fresh foods, jams, jellies, and meats to the consumers. And remembering that I was at a store the other day that had up on one item the marketing for that banner said local, and it did not qualify for local under USDA. It was 700-800 miles away. And so I would encourage those stores that look at their marketing not to tell the consumers wrong. And really appreciate the people who come out and support the farmers market, because it's really a good time. There's good music, good opportunities to visit, plus get all those really good local produce. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Sellers.
Well, that farmer's market gave you a menu to sell your corn crop this year, didn't it, Ron?
Yes, it did. And there are several farmers markets around.
Right, okay.
Local.
Well,
Local.
I enjoyed your corn.
Bueller has one.
I
Haven.
enjoyed your corn. I have no other items.
Bueller, Haven, Yoder, and Hutch are the ones I know about.
Hearing no other comments, I didn't get. Did I get?
Did I send one? I thought
You did.
I had. I really did.
Oh, yeah, you did last week.
Like it was just
Oh, last week.
before I
Okay.
had.
Hang on, I'll find. I'll get them. I'll get. You gotta send them at like 8 a.m. the day of.
I thought of it as I did it. I was like, I'm probably too organized for this.
Okay. I have one here you sent on August 1st. Acquisition of, are they both the same?
Yeah, they should both be the same. I think one involves, do they both involve different people?
Yes, one involves Harlan, one involves Don.
That'd be the only difference, is who you have in the meeting.
Okay. I'd make a motion to go into executive session until 11:45 with the county administrator and county counselor joining us in the executive session. The session is justified under coma because the subject is a preliminary discussion of potential acquisition of real estate by Reno County.
Did you include, I think, do you guys care who goes first? Donna? Maybe
think-
Harlan, did you include Harlan?
Um,
I'm not sure you said Harlan.
Yeah, it wasn't in here, but we also
Harlan.
to add Harlan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Hurst. Roll call.
Commissioner Hurst?
Yes.
Commissioner Sellers?
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen?
Yes.
until 11:45, correct?
11:45, 15
Okay.
minutes.